concerns about the system. It is his system. It is his system, and it's astonishing to me that he could seek to deny that he ever said it. But let me
one second, Mr. Speaker, 1 second. Mr. British Minister has neither denied anything or not. I know that there were some letters, there was an exchange. And let us be careful about that. The minister hasn't got up to deny. There was some concern expressed, but all I am saying, what is coming out now requires us to really go further to have some specificity attached to it. If not, we can't go further. That is what we do.
I will come back to you if I may. As far as the point I'm trying to make is concerned, that the government is in control of the system in its entirety as regards the work of the National Tender and Procurement Board. That the minister is part of the cabinet, and the cabinet is the executive is part of the government. As far as we're concerned, Mr. Speaker, the issue of procurement pervades every single element of the difficulties that we face on an economic front. And if it isn't bridges, if it isn't the question of bridges or roads or stone scams, then it is helicopters, eastbound highway, and a whole range of things. Airports, and others, in which contracts are awarded, and the value of the contracts, the basis on which the contracts are being arrived at, remain questionable, non-transparent, and in almost all cases cost far more than one would have expected, and that far more than it costs anywhere else. The result of all this, Mr. Speaker, is that if you look at the question of corruption, that is why Guyana ranks as the second most corrupt country in the entire Latin American Caribbean region. What? Okay? And as regards the economic freedom, as regards the question of the work of the government itself, the U.S. Department of State itself, in an examination of the investment climate, also refers to corruption as widespread and reflecting little political will to implement legislation passed on the procurement or in relation to asset declaration. So these are not just cases that exist in a vacuum. The World Economic Forum's Global Competitiveness Report ranks Guyana as 115 out of 134 in terms of corruption. In other words, it doesn't have far to go to be the most corrupt in the world. As regards the question of the relevance of corruption to procurement, let me just say that the World Bank report, which is jointly done with the Transparency International, it argues that whilst the budget process is open to legislative review, government contracts and the management of foreign aid lack transparency and efficiency. And as regards Freedom House report, it says in terms of financial management, Guyana's national audit reports, it cites the report even of the Auditor General in relation to procurement. It cites the millions of dollars paid for medical supplies that hospitals could not account for. That is from the report of the World Bank and the TI. It includes several millions paid for medical supplies and hospitals that they couldn't account for. It also points to evidence of petty and grand forms of corruption in the management of public resources. Okay? It relates to the question because I'm saying that procurement is affected and it lies at the heart of corruption and why we rank so poorly as a corrupt
laughing? What's the significance?
So as regards this matter, Mr. Speaker, the point is that we are in a situation in which the government argues that it needs to have a no objection clause and the powers of no objection in order to stop the procurement process leading to problems. But right now, when it actually exercises those powers and when the NTPD is entirely appointed by the government, we see no effort at all to review the process in spite of complaints, and instead of that, the government focuses upon blocking the establishment of the National Procurement Commission. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the argument that the minister brings that international obligations, for example, require a no objection clause, that is true. It is true that the IDB and many others require a no objection clause. But the experience we've had is that the government exercises these powers without reference to anyone or anybody. Normally, when legislation empowers ministers, to carry out a function at a policy level, it normally should be done on the basis of advice from established technical offices. In Guyana, in contradistinction to that, ministers, including many that are here, exercise these functions completely arbitrarily, capriciously, whether it is in relation to local government, personalities that are not qualified, or any other. And that is the problem, Mr. Speaker. That is the problem. I'm addressing the Speaker. I'm addressing the Speaker. The problem is, Mr. Speaker, that as the legislation currently stands, the government deserves no more involvement and no more power than currently exists. Because with the power that they have already, they already abuse executive office. And therefore, there is no merit in this particular contention. If a no objection clause is needed by an international agency, it is not sufficient to write in those powers for the cabinet, especially in the absence of the establishment of the Public Procurement Commission. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is, first of all, that the supposed conflict that is supposed to be captured in clause 54, 1 and 6, as articulated by the minister, we reject completely. No such contradiction exists. And as regards the architecture of public procurement, the architecture already gives the government powers which are perhaps excessive, and they should be ashamed to come back to this house to ask for additional powers or the restoration of powers which, when they exercise them almost irresponsibly. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, there is no merit in the case being made. The proposal before us should be struck down, and I urge the House to reject it as we are working.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, Mr. Vanali, you may make your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be given this privilege to speak on a very important national issue that confronts us as a people and as a country. The issue of public procurement touches on every facet of transparency, accountability, and the way in which we carry out public business and public transactions. Indeed, the issue of public procurement is not a static one. It is one that has evolved over the years globally, where rules are constantly amended and changed based on differentiated situations and circumstances. Prior to 1992, indeed, there was widespread criticism in the public procurement process. Criticism leading to, one, the non-existence of a system or a system that was clouded in secrecy. Criticisms that ranges from racial discrimination to widespread corruption and to open lawlessness in the execution of the function of the executive in relation to issues related to procurement, accountability, and financial transactions. Those criticisms are the criticisms of the mischief we sought to correct over the number of years preceding. Number of years after 1992. For a matter of fact, Guyana is indeed the first CARICOM member state to undertake comprehensive procurement reform by amending its constitution in 2003. The reforms were based on the United Nations Trade Act. The reforms were based on UNCITRAL model law. It was not based in isolation of the best practices and standards that obtain internationally. It was founded in international law, international trade law. Now, the honorable member, Mr. Greenidge, pointed to the clause that was unanimously inserted on that day. We are not denying the fact that this clause was inserted, but what we are saying is that the clause flies in the face of constitutional provision. And the constitutional provision must be superior. And what we are seeking to do is to correct something that all of us overlooked on that day. And we all have a responsibility to make that correction today. The honorable member said in his presentation that there is no process for review. In the existing system, there is no process for review. This is far from the factual position of the present system. The present system provides as follows. Where a supplier or contractor is dissatisfied, he is entitled to a review by 1. The procuring entity within 5 days following the publication of the award. 2. An independent authority where the protest is not reviewed by the procuring entity, an independent authority. And 3. Under Article 212 AA1H of the Constitution, the Public Procurement Commission is empowered to investigate complaints from suppliers, contractors, and public entities. That is the last. So to say that there exists at this moment no system or process of review is misleading the nation and misleading our people. And much like in addition to this, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member said that there is a lot of papers out there pointing to our system not being transparent. I believe this is a smokescreen because he has not pointed to a single report or a single document to demonstrate this point that he has made. And I would point to him to the hundreds upon hundreds of no objection received by the government of Guyana from international financial institutions in the water contract. No objection. A no objection from an international institution would mean that all the steps, the process, and the water of the contract was done to the standards of that institution and international best practice. Let us look, Mr. Speaker, to the point the Honorable made, that the Minister of Finance appoints a 15-member commission, a 15-member board.
Yeah, he said that.
This is what the Honorable member said. But let us look at the laws of Guyana. And this is the problem we have. We have half-baked points Constitution. This is what the law says. Section 16(3). The members of the National Procurement Board to be appointed by the minister shall comprise 1. Not more than 5 persons from the public service. 2. Not more than 3 persons from the private sector after consultation with a representative organization. After consultation with a The honorable member went on to say that the minister direct the board. The honorable member went on to say that the minister directs the board, and the minister exercises full control over the board. Let us see what the law says. The National Board shall be responsible for exercising jurisdiction over tenders, the value of which exceeds such amount prescribed by regulation. The board will exercise jurisdiction, not the minister. The board will appoint, not the minister. The board will appoint a pool of evaluators for such period as may determined, not the minister. So this argument that the minister has this exclusive power, this overriding power, this dictatorial power, is one that holds no merit. Mr. Speaker, let me further say that I can understand where the member is coming from. I can understand because there is still the unanswered criticism of the GT&T privatization deal, the Temporary Timbers, the Indian Mining Enterprise. These are still, they're talking now. We are open. Every single transaction is audited. Mr. Speaker, the other issue, Mr. Speaker, is the honorable member saying that the government, that we don't want to give the Procurement Commission. Let me make it categorically clear that we are ready for the Procurement Commission, but we are not ready to give up our fiduciary oversight role that has been given to us by the electorate. We have a fiduciary responsibility that was given to us by the electorate of this country, and this government is not willing to give up that responsibility that the people have given to us. So, Mr. Speaker, blow hot, blow cold, we have a responsibility, and we are going to execute that responsibility in keeping with the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet has power of objection or no objection. I'll point to it, Mr. Lawyer. I'll point to it for you. Now, we must not mix up this role of objection or no objection. It is not synonymous with awarding of a contract. A fact clearly established in the Procurement Act 2003, which according to section 54(4) says, the Cabinet is not authorized to award a tender to suppliers or contractors. Very clear. The Cabinet is not authorized to award a contract to contractors or suppliers. Mr. Speaker, the power granted to the Cabinet under the Procurement Act is merely limited to review of the procurement procedures followed by the procuring entity in recommending a contract. A review, not an award role, a review role. Cabinet power to issue objection or no objection does not collide with or impair or undermine any of the function of the Public Procurement Commission, as set out in 212 AA of the Constitution. the power, and let me quote Section 212A of the Constitution. The power of cabinet to issue objection or no objection merely afford another layer of oversight by the government, which has a fiduciary responsibility to inform. There is it, Mr. Ramsden. Do you want to argue against this provision of the Constitution? Mr. Speaker, do we want to wish away this provision of the Constitution? Do we want to sit here and believe and appear to believe as if this provision does not exist? We cannot implement the provision of the Constitution in a willy-nilly manner, in a selective manner, in a manner that we think suit our political aim and objective. The Constitution is there as a guiding light, the guiding principle, the guiding framework through which we must manage the country and the resources that we have. The Government Commission not award, but you also have no power to grant a no objection. So where is this oversight layer that the Constitution talks about? Where is it? Where is the oversight layer? Mr. Speaker,
remedial action.
the Constitution provision does not take away the right of Cabinet under Section 54 of the Procurement Act to grant an objection. The contract neither does it grant, Mr. Speaker, the provision does not take away the right from Cabinet, neither does it grant the right to the Public Procurement Commission. Neither it does not grant the right to the Public Procurement Commission, full stop. It follows therefore, Mr. Speaker, that there is absolutely no contradiction in Cabinet retaining its mere no objection power in the awards of contract upon the establishment of the government.
You had it then. You don't need it.
Mr. Speaker, the oversight role afforded to the government under Procurement Act 2003 is not unique to that. In fact, the procurement legislation in many advanced and regional economies provide the government with greater latitude for influencing the award of contract in the procurement process. And I wish to learn to Singapore. And we always say in this parliament, we must look for best practices, international standards, and international benchmarks. Let us look at what Singapore has. In Singapore, the minister has much wide power in public procurement according to the Government Procurement Act, Chapter 120, under Section 6(1). It states, the minister may make regulations to govern procurement subject to the Act. Further, Section 6(2)(c) empowers the minister to make regulations governing the procedure for the award of a procurement contract and the procedure following such award. Here in Singapore, the latitude extended to the executive through the minister is not only an oversight latitude, but one that empowers him to make regulations governing the procedure for the award of a procurement contract and the procedure following such award.
Regulations, changing time.
Such power to regulate procedures could indeed clearly lead to a situation of influence. However, in contrast, the Procurement Act 2003 of Ghana empowers the Minister of Finance under 61 to merely advise the National Board or the Procurement Commission for the administration of the Procurement Act. Look at the vastness, the superiority of our act in relation to Singapore. Australia, the State Procurement Act 2000 Section 21 provides that the minister may give direction. Listen to this. The minister may give direction to the State Procurement Board. Under Section 21(2),
Direction.
such direction may require the board to take into account. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important point for us to understand. Such direction may require the board to take into account a particular government policy or a particular principle or matter. Moreover, the board is mandated under Section 4 not only to listen to the minister, to comply with any direction given to it by the minister. This is Australia. We don't want this at all. Jamaican Belize. In Jamaican Belize, there exists a well-developed public procurement system. The cabinet is responsible for setting a national policy for public procurement and directives that govern the procurement process. The cabinet also approves the contract. The cabinet also approves the contract of Belize and Jamaica. These jurisdictions, there is an office of the Contractor General. And what and who is the office of the Contractor General?
What are his functions, man?
I can list all of you.
No, read it.
In St. Kitts and Nevis, the Minister of Finance is empowered by the Finance Act to regulate procurement. The Ministry of Finance issues financial regulation in relation to the procurement of goods and services. And, Mr. Speaker, the reference was made to Canada. Let us listen to Canada. The Executive Council of Ontario, informally and more commonly the Cabinet of Ontario, plays an important role in the government of Ontario in accordance with the Westminster system. A council of ministers of the Crown, chaired by the Premier of Ontario, the Executive Council almost always make up the members of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, advises the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario on how to exercise the executive functions of the Ontario Crown. The members of the council are appointed by the Lieutenant Governor on the advice of his or her Premier. Though the Lieutenant Governor does not generally attend council meetings, directives, and this is a point of interest, directives issued by the Viceroy and the advice of his or her ministers are said to be ordered by the Governor in council. Mr. Speaker, Financial Administration Act. Mr. Speaker, let us look at the European Bank. Let us look at Rule 3.31. Rule 3.31 of the European Bank. And this is what that rule says. The client shall submit to the bank a report containing the results of the tender evaluation and its recommendation for the award of the contract. The bank will review the findings and recommendations as a final step in establishing the eligibility of the contract for bank financing. Mr. Speaker, even the European Bank understands the importance of this oversight responsibility. Understand the responsibility because it is a bank finances. It's a bank regulation, and the bank is ensuring that it holds that no objection rule in the award of the contract. Let us look at Rule 2.6. The bank may agree with the borrower to expand or reduce a shortlist. However, Once the bank has issued a no objection to a shortlist, the borrower shall not add or delete names without the bank's approval. The power enshrined in the no objection clause of this bank is even far wider than what the cabinet has. Because if the cabinet has a no objection to a contract, the cabinet cannot change the recommendation. The cabinet cannot change the recommendation. The cabinet can merely send back that recommendation to the National Procurement and Debt Administration Board with its reasons outlining its position, but has no power or jurisdiction to change the recommendation of the National Procurement and Debt Administration. Mr. Speaker, the Caribbean Development Bank, Rule 1.13, CDB does not finance expenditure for goods, works, and services which have not been procured in accordance with the agreed provision in the financing agreement and as further elaborated in the procurement plan. CDB will declare a misprocurement, and it is the policy of CDB to cancel a portion of CDB financing allocated to the goods, works, and services that has been misprocured. CDB may in addition exercise other remedies provided for under the financing agreement, even after the contract is awarded and after obtaining an objection. So CDB's role is even expanded after the issuing of an objection or no objection. Of course, the honorable member cannot understand what this has to do with what we're debating, because the member does not want to take into account what are the international best practices and standards governing procurement. Because it does not suit them. The mere fact that these international agencies understand that they must maintain a role in offering an objection or no objection tells us that you cannot take away the oversight responsibility from the entity that has a responsibility to ensure the proper implementation of the project. In this case, it is the government that has the responsibility of ensuring the implementation of projects, policies, and programs. And you cannot take away that oversight responsibility from the government in ensuring that its policies, its plans, and its programs are implemented in an effective, efficient, transparent, and accountable way. That is important. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that there exists the need for an oversight responsibility. There exists a role for the executive in the procurement of goods and services. We are saying that that role must not be the role to award. It must not be the role to dictate. It must not be the role to direct. But merely we are saying that role must be one that allows oversight of the process and allowing the government to fulfill its fiduciary responsibility to the electorate of this country. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I would say that I support completely the amendment by the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. This is the appropriate time for us to take the suspension. We will do so now, and we resume in 1 hour's time.